collectively celebrate Bill Russell enough for paving the way for literally almost everybody?
No.
Because it doesn't feel like it. And now that he has unfortunately passed, I feel like we're going to try and make up for lost time here, and it's going to be impossible to do.
What do they say about that? Give a guy his flowers while he's alive.
Right.
Give that person their flowers while they're alive. There is nothing that we can do that's going to elevate Bill Russell more as a basketball player. The next thing that we do, we talk about him as humanitarian. That's where we go. And if you do anything other than getting this man a street in the middle of Boston, I think that's the next step that you go to, because he meant that much to civil rights. He meant that much to Boston. He meant that much as a player that played in the NBA. Mm-hmm. He said black or white. It's just like he had that about him.
He changed the game.
Yeah, he did. You would hear that from all his contemporaries, Tommy Heinsohn, all those guys said Russell changed the game. He wasn't the greatest shooter, but as Tommy would say, when he had to make them, babe, he made them. He made them. He wasn't the greatest free throw shooter. Big time made free throws, block shots. They didn't even record block shots back during this time. 20, 30 rebounds in a game. There was nothing to be, that would happen a lot.
One of the reasons, Max, that we wanted to have you, and I'm sure in part why so many want to have you in terms of doing interviews, is not just your obviously current day Celtics affiliation, that you're such a great guest here, but like we could have anybody on the show who's a historian or who can just like talk about Bill Russell's impact on the NBA, the things that you read about. But what's really hard to find is someone like yourself who had a personal relationship with him, as you touched on. And, I know you started to talk about it a little bit, but I'd love for you to just expand some more about what it was like being a player here in Boston. And, I don't know how present Bill Russell was in those days, obviously, and what kind of you use the word mentor, what kind of a mentor, he was to you in terms of learning from him both on and off the floor.
I mean, I would say my conversations were limited with Bill. I could say they might be as many, maybe as 10, 15 minutes. There wasn't anything where we went out and broke bread or nothing like that. But during those times that he spoke to me, it was like I was soaking in knowledge. And he talked about all kinds of things, how it was when he played during his day. There was a movie called The Green Book, which was out a couple of years ago. Might have won an Academy Award, I think. And one of the actors in there was pretty much about civil rights. He was a great pianist who played during the 60s and early 60s and late 50s. And he was barnstorming around the country. He went from the North to the Deep South. And in the Deep South, he was playing at a restaurant. And the guy said, well, you can't eat here. What do you mean? I'm playing here. He said, well, let me give you a story. He said one time the Boston Celtics came to town, and their big kahuna, I guess he was making reference to Bill Russell, and the guy said, I wonder where he ate. And the guy, being funny, said, I don't know, but he didn't eat here. And it was just a clear thing about Bill Russell wasn't allowed to eat in a public restaurant. I mean, here's a guy won Olympic medals. And that didn't happen for him. So it's all this craziness that you think about and you talk about who Russell was. It was just crazy.
Well, Evan and I were just talking before the show too about, and a lot of it people have probably seen, it's floating around social media right now, but, stories his daughter has told in the past of, what it was like when he was playing. And obviously the racism and so much more. Like racism doesn't even feel like enough in terms of describing it. Exactly. Vandalism and so much, like Celtics would go on the road and he'd come back home and his trophy cases have been destroyed and his trophies and vandals would break in and literally defecate in his bed underneath the sheets. I mean, the kinds of stuff that he had to encounter. And I mean, it's just beyond words. Like I don't even entirely know where I'm going with the question. Were there ever, like you said, you didn't go out and break bread, but did you ever ask him, like, man, like what was that like playing in here in this town or in this city and in that age? And versus anything that obviously you experienced in your career?
Well, really didn't talk that much about it. I mean, they just touched on it. I remember Sam Jones talking about how he couldn't eat in a restaurant and how things happened in I think it was Fort Wayne, Indiana, how they couldn't eat. Russell talked about the same kind of things that happened during the time that he had to be around, and just things that he wanted to do. And it was it when you thought about it, when I looked at it, it was just sad. To think that all they wanted to do was play basketball, but he was shot into the forefront of civil rights, and that, to me, that was huge.
But also embraced it. Like that. Like some guys probably all they wanted to do was play basketball.
Well,
but it doesn't seem like that was true of him.
Didn't embrace it. What he did, he wrapped himself in a blanket of it, and it was almost like a cocoon. He was going to somehow come out on the other side like a butterfly. This is who Bill Russell was. He understood the system. He understood where he came from. University of San Francisco, the Dons coming into the NBA, huge trade. Bill Russell, that Red Auerbach was able to pull, and then coming to Boston, being in a town that they didn't even sell out. Here's a team that won, but the Bruins could sell out, and they couldn't. And it was basically because of the color of their skin. They were in Boston, a town that did not really respect and love those players of color who played on that team. That's how great they were. And you think of it, to be in your own team, to be in your own city, and to be a team that good, that's crazy. And not to be respected, it just doesn't happen.
Yeah. I was just thinking about, as Kaufman was talking about that last question, of the Michael Jordan quote of Republicans buy shoes too, comes up, and it's like there's that mentality, and then there's Bill, as you said, wrapping himself in a blanket and carrying it forward for the rest of everything. I'm not trying to be I'm not trying to start a war here. I'm just saying, just to look at the two ways of handling a situation.
Here's the thing: you can't even compare one to the other.
Right.
You can't compare Russell, what he did. You can't. That just can't even be compared. Those things, what Russell did was unique in a way that we can't even think about. And his time on this earth, if I can get 88 years and impact the world the way he has, that's all any of us would love to do. He was a giant. Not only was he a giant like that physically, but he was a giant among men. When he walked into a room, his presence was felt. The great ones would always bow down to him. And that was just unbelievable when you think who he was.
Do you think that, and I don't know how much in the later years, obviously, because it's not like Bill Russell traveled a lot or came back to Boston a ton. Like occasionally you'd see him in Springfield at the Hall of Fame or obviously at the NBA Finals, that type of thing. But in his later years, I don't know how much you had an opportunity to talk to him, but it was very clear, just me being an outsider looking in and seeing him on video or in interviews, always smiling and laughing and jovial and happy. I mean, do you think that by the end he was so, despite everything, so much that he had endured, it was trumped by all that he accomplished in the end?
I think that he was at peace with himself. That's all that happens. I think that, yeah, you can be mad, all these things happen, but at the end of the day, you just want to be at peace. And that's what he was. One of my last moments with Bill Russell that I can remember so well was at Kobe Bryant's passing. They had a big event. And I'm thinking to myself, the players got seats, and they were like, well, Max, we'll see if we can get you a seat at Kobe's thing. And I'm thinking well, I don't want to sit up in the, nosebleeds. And they finally give me my seat, and I get to my seat, and Bill Russell's sitting right in front of me. So I said, I must have a good damn seat up in this piece. and I remember him standing up, but just physically, you could see that he was tired. His body was starting to fail because he was, remember, trying to get up, literally out of the seat, and it's hard for all us big guys to do it. Knees are so bad. And I'm behind him, and I give him a push, to get him up out of the seat. And it was just so, I mean, I don't feel like I was his best buddy, but the fact that he knew me, that I could be a guy that he could say, hey, I'm gonna give you the finger right now. That was real cool to me. I was like, man, I must be a cool dude in order for Bill Russell to give me the finger, to give me the bird. So yeah, that's good stuff.